In the shimmering skyline of London's financial district, there once stood a man who could move markets with a single phone call. His name was Edward Halden, the golden boy of British banking. Charming, brilliant, untouchable. He built an empire on trust and reputation, and for years, he was the symbol of success. But behind the mahogany desks and marble floors, something was rotting. And when the truth finally came out, the world learned that Edward Halden had done the impossible. He had robbed his own bank. It began quietly. The year was 1987, a time when greed was celebrated and the financial world was drunk on risk. Halden was at the center of it all. He ran Halden and Pierce International, one of London's oldest private banks, a dynasty built by his grandfather after the war. Clients included oil magnates, politicians, even royalty. To the outside world, Edward was the perfect gentleman banker. Tailored suits, classical music, and that polite smile that said you can trust me. But inside his office, the numbers were beginning to whisper something else. The markets were shifting, and the empire was bleeding money through quiet cracks. Small losses hidden in shadow accounts. Halden knew that if investors ever saw the real books, the illusion would shatter. So he did what no one expected. He decided to steal from himself. It started with a transfer, small at first. A few £100,000 moved through offshore shells in the Cayman Islands, disguised as foreign investment. Then millions, and then tens of millions. Each transaction perfectly crafted, wrapped in layers of legal jargon and coded memos only he could read. To anyone else, it looked like strategy. To Halden, it was survival. But money changes people, especially when it's not yours. By the early 1990s, Edward Halden was living two lives. By day, the brilliant banker who gave lectures at Oxford on financial ethics. By night, the man who gambled in Monte Carlo and bought stolen art through intermediaries in Paris. He was no longer saving his empire, he was building a secret one. In a private villa on the French Riviera, Halden stored what he called the foundation for his future. Gold bars stamped with his own bank's insignia, suitcases of untraceable bearer bonds, and the centerpiece, a hidden ledger, handwritten, that tracked every transfer he had ever made and every lie he had told. But arrogance has a way of inviting fate. In 1993, a young analyst named Thomas Reeves joined the bank. Fresh out of Cambridge, he was sharp, idealistic, and too curious for his own good. While auditing some dormant accounts, he found something odd. Identical signatures on two different client transfers, both supposedly authorized by Edward himself. It could have been a clerical error, but Thomas decided to dig deeper. Each day after hours, he stayed in the office, comparing numbers, cross-referencing dates. He began to notice a pattern. Invisible threads connecting dozens of foreign accounts that always ended in one place. A shell company in Zurich called EH Holdings. When he looked up the registration details, his heart froze. The initials stood for Edward Halden. Thomas could have stayed quiet. He could have walked away, pretended he'd never seen it. But instead, he went to the authorities. And that single decision set off one of the biggest scandals in British banking history. Within days, investigators raided the headquarters of Halden and Pierce. They seized files, computers, and tapes. For the first time in decades, the name Halden appeared in the newspapers not as a symbol of prestige, but as a synonym for betrayal. The empire began to crumble overnight. Edward Halden was in Switzerland when the first headlines hit. He was having breakfast on the terrace of his villa when his assistant ran in holding a newspaper. On the front page, banking titan accused of defrauding his own empire. For the first time in years, Halden's hand trembled. He put down his coffee and said only one word: "It's over." But even in defeat, he refused to surrender. He liquidated his offshore assets, destroyed evidence, and vanished. By the time Interpol issued a warrant, he was gone, leaving behind an empire in ruins and billions unaccounted for. Months later, a private investigator in Monaco spotted a man resembling Halden in a casino, older, thinner, but unmistakably him. Security footage confirmed it, but by the time authorities arrived, he had disappeared again. All they found was a single chip left on the roulette table, engraved with the initials EH. In London, the scandal sent shockwaves through Parliament. Hundreds of clients lost everything. The Halden family name, once respected for a century, became a curse. The bank collapsed within the year, and Thomas Reeves, the young analyst who exposed the fraud, was both praised and condemned. Some called him a hero. Others said he had destroyed an institution. But history has a cruel sense of irony. Because while the world blamed Halden, no one ever found the missing money. Years later, whispers began to circulate. A private vault in Singapore had been opened under a false name, containing millions in gold matching Halden's missing assets. But the owner had vanished months before the discovery. Interpol believed Halden had lived for years under different identities. One rumor placing him in South America, another in Dubai. None were ever proven. In 2007, an obituary appeared in a small Swiss newspaper for a man named Edgar Hall, a reclusive art collector who had died peacefully in his sleep. The photo showed an older gentleman with silver hair and sharp eyes that once charmed London's elite. DNA tests were never requested. The file on Edward Halden remains officially open. To this day, investigators estimate that nearly £120 million, over $200 million in today's value, vanished under his watch. And yet, no one has ever found the hidden ledger. No one knows how many lives he ruined, or how many secrets he took with him to the grave. But perhaps that's the greatest irony of all, that a man who built an empire on trust would be remembered only for the lie that destroyed it. In the end, Edward Halden didn't just rob his clients. He robbed history of its certainty. And somewhere, maybe beneath a false name or in a forgotten vault, the ghost of a banker still counts his fortune. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, make sure to subscribe for more real historical tales told like movies.